everybody. I hope that you are well. Second take of this morning's vlog. God, they look terrible. I hope that you are well. Hope everyone's good. It's Tuesday. It's the 26th of September. If you could give me a little message and see if this has actually came through. I think I know what I'm doing now. I think that once I've published this, I need to download this video and so that it will remain on the Patreon account. So everything seems to be a bit delayed with technology. Good morning, Susan. Yay, it's working. It's going to be dark for a minute or two. I don't know why. Maybe because I didn't jog as much this morning, but I got out the car at exactly the same time, and I'm quite significantly behind on the walk because I kind of scheduled it so that I wasn't in this dark forestry type bit. There's a clearing further up, and that's where we started it yesterday. Yeah, strange I got out the car at exactly the same time. Rewriting Where's foundations? Rewriting. Been thinking a bit about that. Must have been because I was talking about it yesterday, but thinking about all the habits, all the unconscious, non-conscious habits that were forged and formulated when we were just infants through fetal development, what patterns were being encoded, and through that last trimester in utero, how many of us children of the 70s mums thought it was, my mum didn't actually, my mum's not a smoker, but how many parents smoked with their child? And this stuff isn't new. There was a book that I read 20 years ago plus. It was written in the 60s by an author called Janov, and it was called The Story of the Unborn Child. And back then they didn't have the science that they have today, and they did an experiment with ultrasound with a child, and they subjected the child to nicotine, and they could actually see the child kind of making a sort of action, the fetus rather, making an action and letting out a noise similar to that of a scream. So yes, that's where I was yesterday. It looks like, have I had any messages? Let me just see if this is working. Maybe what we're going to do is look at another platform, because this is an absolute pile of pants. One person. Louise, Alison. Oh no, there's actually more, but it's only showing me that there's one. Right, thanks for saying good morning, Louise. Alison, thanks for saying good morning. Susan, yes. Bloody awful platform. Patreon. Rah! Getting myself upset with it. Right, rewiring our foundations. We started that yesterday. I might as well repeat most of it because it's interesting. But why now? Why do I think it's so important now that we need to rewire our foundations, right? So our foundations are our thoughts then create our feelings then create our actions, okay? So when we think of the body, think of it more in, rather than it just being like this body, right? But see it as there's a chemist in there that's dishing out prescriptions and for the way that you think, because we're an electrochemical organism, okay? We're electrochemical. And you can't say that fast enough because it's thought chemical at exactly the same time. The minute you have a thought to arousal, where you start to get aroused by something, now that could be arousal as in arousal to eat something. It's an arousal that you get hungry, your body starts to get stimulated, you start to get aroused, you want something to eat. You might start to get stimulated about fear. You might start to be stimulated that there's a masked man in your house trying to steal your car keys, whatever. Arousal to something that's exciting, classical music might arouse you, or music might arouse you. It might arouse the hairs on your neck to stand on end. Something beauty, art might arouse you. It changes how you feel, how you think. is therefore how you feel. Those feelings are drugs. So as we said yesterday, the biggest drug dealer in the world that makes AstraZeneca, Pfizer, BioNTech, all of those companies that were able to produce vaccines willy-nilly 3 years ago, right? Pablo Escobar, the Medellin cartel, all the drug dealers in the world, all shocked together, all the Albanian gangs, you mix them all together, it makes them look like they're in kindergarten, and we have those pharmaceutical laboratories inside of our brain. Our brain is the chemist. So when we meet someone new, when you fall in love, when you break up with someone, for an example, and there's a loss of attachment and there's a bonding, you might go without food. But similarly, when you're in love, you might go without food. Now, when you've went through a breakup that's been difficult and it's been harrowing and your heart's been broken and you've lost that connection, that attachment, that sense of purpose, that sense of meaning, that connection that was created with that significant other, that's harrowing, and the chemicals that's been released into our body are very, very different than the chemicals that are being released into our body when we're in love. And we're in love and people say, you look different, you know, you've got a glow about you, right? So what's causing that? What causes somebody to look completely different? Or they get a new job, or something they've been wanting. I was thinking a house. You know, they move house, they move street, they get a position, they get a different job, they get a job that they've really wanted. That can sometimes give us a similar kind of feeling to love, to being in love. We've got this confidence, this newfound ability where people are actually valuing us. And I've actually got a friend that's got a job in a pretty male-dominated environment, actually, and she started this job. And she said to me, and she's really glowing, and she's already really, you know, she's got a good level of fitness and stuff like that. But she said something really significant to me about it. And she went, you know, it's all men, and they're actually taking my point of view. I was like, but do most men not take your point of view? But that was important for her. I never dismissed it. It wasn't until afterwards it started to regurgitate in my mind and my thinking. And I was like, that's really important to her, actually, that she said that. So as a woman, she must feel that her point of view in this corporate world that she's inhabited for a while has not been heard. She's not felt heard before. So when I'm speaking to her again, I'll go back on that. And that's really important to her, and that's increasing her chemicals, which is increasing how she is. It's increasing how she's communicating. She's communicating really, really well. She's communicating what we call positively. She's got a real glow about her. She's got a real charge about her. And she's starting to attract different things. She's been offered to go and look after somebody's house in the Bahamas. And it's like, oh, wow, you know, so I've got 2 weeks holiday at Christmas and I can get to spend that in the Bahamas and it's not going to cost me any money and blah, 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 blah. And things are really, really working for her. Why? Because the chemicals inside are like a dynamo. Like, imagine that we're a dynamo. Imagine that this is a dynamo and we've got to get this dynamo working again. And we've got to get it going. The faster that we pedal, that little dynamo starts spinning, the brighter our light. Now, you put that little dynamo in the back tyre of your bicycle and you're pedalling down the hill late at night, and if you're pedalling really slow, the light's really dim and you can hardly see where you're going. Whereas if you're pedalling really quickly, your light is really bright and you get to see where you're going. Now, a lot of us feel like we don't have any direction. A lot of us feel that we can't see the path in front of us. A lot of us feel that there's helplessness, there's hopelessness. Well, if there's helplessness and hopelessness, right, without just not beating around the bush about it, your dynamo is not even strapped to the bloody bike, right? So let's not get disheartened. If you are in a feeling where it's low and empty and stuff like that, harrowing feelings of upset and loss and tragedy, right? Well, you know, you might have a dynamo, but actually that dynamo will only work when the wheels are going clockwise. Maybe what you're doing is pedaling backwards. Maybe you have got a dynamo in the bike. Maybe I was being harsh. So the first thing that we've got to do is go, well, what could be my dynamo? What it could be your dynamo. Your dynamo is going to be completely different than your next door neighbours. It's going to be completely different than somebody that your idol. somebody that you worship, somebody that you look up to, somebody like your pop idol. Well, what do they do? How do they get themselves? What's their dynamo? What gets them bright? You've got to find that thing for you, and every single person is different. That's why don't listen to somebody else. You know, you've got to do 100 burpees a day, or you've got to do 20 sit-ups a day, you've got to do 20 push-ups a day, or whatever that might be. That might work for them. That's fantastic. It might definitely tree. I love trees. I have an affinity with trees. Now, you say that's part of my coding, that's part of what's inside of me. I was brought up in a forest. I was on a road very similar to this one that I'm walking on right now. It's almost identical, the road to our farm cottage. I was surrounded by trees as a child. So from the age of 3, when I moved into that house, I lived there until I was sort of 16. So I was surrounded by trees for the first 13 years of my life. Not that the first 13 years were that important, but the first 7 certainly were. So for that 4 years, that really important part for me, I was encoded with trees. Now, is it because of that? Maybe. Is it because I just think trees are good things? Maybe. Who knows? Is it because of where the stars were aligned when I was born? Maybe. I don't know. I don't know why. I don't know what that's about. I have a friend who feels how I feel, like they've described that when they're away from the sea, they need to be by the sea. That doesn't do it for me. I have been with them in Luscantire Beach and Harris and all over Scarista Bay and been all over the Western Isles with them and walked along the most magnificent beaches, pure white sands with crystal turquoise water and not another soul on it. Is it nice? Yeah, it's all right. It's pretty good. How you doing? Language. Small steps. So the things that work for other people might not necessarily work for you. The beach was lovely and I can appreciate its beauty and all its splendour and all its wonder. I can appreciate that. I really can. I can go, wow, that's absolutely incredible. But does it satiate me? No, it doesn't satiate me at all. If I've been away, like there, like I can use that as an example, the island of Harris, living right next to a beach, on the beach, looking at the water. Yeah, that's nice, like that, whatever. After a few days, well, a bit longer, 3 or 4 days of being up there, right, I start to feel a little bit anxious, a little bit kind of anxiousy. And then I found this place in Stornoway, which I didn't know was there. And it's in the castle grounds, and the castle owner, the landowner, whatever you want to call him, Mr. Castle, he planted all these trees, right, in this beautiful river. It's almost a miniature version of this, a very small version of this look that I get to walk around in the morning. Instantly calm. I just feel my nervous system calming down. Now, this is what we're talking about when we're looking at rewiring your internal narrative. Why do you want to rewire your internal narrative? Because your internal narrative is directly linked to your nervous system, right? Your nervous system stores more information than the cloud. You couldn't buy the amount of terabytes of information that your nervous system stored. Your nervous system is stored information that's primordial. Your nervous system has stored information in it that's older than the stars themselves, right? There is primordial programs within you that when this planet was surrounded in methane, right? There's been oxygen and water and the LK2 and the leptomites and stuff like that that's been going around this planet for millions and millions and millions of years. You are encoded with information that's directly linked and hardwired into your nervous system, right? That's primordial. So this is why it's so important that we start to rewrite our foundations, we start to rewrite our internal scripts. The minute we start to think debilitating thoughts, and it's not thinking positive, it's not positive thinking. Positive thinking is shite, right? It's bollocks. Positive thinking is like sticking a rose, one single rose, in a pile of horse shite and walking past it and expecting to smell the rose. You're not going to be able to do that, right? When you're feeling shit inside, right, and you're going, yeah, I'm doing absolutely fantastic. Well, in actual fact, you're not doing absolutely fantastic. It would be more helpful to say, I could have a little bit more energy, but I am really confident that by doing the patterns and behaviours that I've started to get my dynamo working, yeah, by the next week, I'm going to be feeling a lot better than I currently am. And that's true. Now, this pattern is day 2. As I said to you yesterday, you watched, I went to grab my headphones, they weren't there, I had to go back to the house, it was like everything was conspiring against me. Left the house at exactly the same time this morning with my headphones, but I'm a little bit further back in the walk. I was a little bit upset when I was speaking to you guys. I was like, hey, wow, I'm a little bit behind schedule this morning. This isn't great because of when I'm starting work. So, when we start to reprogram our patterns of behaviour, hello from Australia. Hello, Australia. My father is from London. Hi, Ian Watts. I didn't know that you had signed in to Patreon, but that's lovely to see you. So we're talking this morning about rewiring our foundation and why it's important to rewire our foundation, where these imprints, these very significant imprints, were encoded in our earliest of development in utero. We spoke yesterday that we realised 20 years ago or so that children do not come into the world a blank canvas. Children come into the world pre-programmed for a world of which their mother was experiencing electrochemically. So, like for an example, if you play a particular song, which there's a beautiful, I'll share a beautiful story with you. There's an African tribe that when the couple get together and, for an example, they start courting, they create a song between each other. This couple have a song and they sing that song to one another. And when they get married, that song is sung to them by the congregation of the community. And this becomes their song. And when they make love, they sing this song. When they court, they make this song. Their song, they sing together all the time. And when that child eventually enters into the womb of the wife, the father sings that song to the child. It then becomes the child's song. And what happens is they keep that song. And when that child becomes of age and it ever does anything untoward or strays from the community or does, something illegal or whatever it does, they sit the child down in what's called a potlatch. It's like a community hall. And the community get together and sing that song so that that child gets to remember where it came from before it had became conscious. That child that's in utero has no consciousness. Consciousness hasn't came online. Its computer hasn't been turned on yet. You play a particular piece of music in utero and you play it when it comes out. It will remember at some level, be that cellular, when it was in utero. Why is it so important right now to be rewriting our script? Why is it so important right now for us to be rewriting our script and hardwiring a new program? Setting up. That's a prime example. This guy that we just passed when I was walking there, I need to get fit again. He goes through cycles. It's just came to me. He goes through cycles and he looked pretty heavy. Until he fixes, if you want to call it that, and rewrites his foundation, He'll lose weight and then put it back on again, lose weight and put it back on again. Why do 70% of people that win the lottery go bankrupt? Why do 70% of people that win the lottery go bankrupt? Because they've not rewired their foundation. They have not rewired and installed the programs that are effective and required in order to be able to manage that money and buy assets and liabilities. People, when they win the lottery or come into money, they go out and they buy things that lose value. They buy cars. They'll go and buy like a really expensive car. Like, so for an example, you go and buy a Vauxhall Corsa, or you go and buy a Peugeot 206, they're both 15 grand or 20 grand new. The Corsa is still a liability, but more of an asset than a Peugeot, because over a 3-year period and 30,000 miles or kilometres or whatever you put on it, the Vauxhall is going to be worth, it's got a higher residual income, it's got a higher second-hand value. Now, although it's still a liability, because cars are liabilities, unless you're buying a car to hire that vehicle out to make money from it, it then becomes an asset. So how do you turn something that's a liability into an asset? So 70% of people that win the lottery end up going bankrupt. Why? Because they go out and buy stuff that's not like a Vauxhall Corsa and it's not like a Peugeot 206. They go out and buy high price ticket items, Rolls Royces, Bentleys. Now, that car might have a showroom sticker price of 200 grand. And the minute you drive it out the factory, it's worth 100, 150 grand. Now, Range Rovers, boats, toys, as you would describe. Have you bought yourself any new toys lately? As 50-year-old men, well, I'm 50-year-old right now, my pals are 50-year-old, when they're buying something new, right? What's that? Turn that off. Why do you go and buy toys? Because you are feeding the inner child. You're feeding the child that's desperate to be loved, that's desperate to be seen, that's desperate to be validated, that's desperate to be heard. It never was. It's still abandoned. It felt abandoned, perhaps, by its caregivers. It never felt recognised. It never felt heard. It never felt clever at school or whatever. Blah, 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 right? You could get into that. And it tries to take care of it by buying it liabilities instead of assets. Now, imagine that you bought that inner child something. When you look at people who are heavily invested, perhaps, in property, when I say heavily invested, they own half of the West End of Glasgow, or they own half of the East End of Glasgow, or they own half of the East End of London. They didn't buy it. Their family bought it, but it was their great-grandparents that bought it. And when they bought that asset, they didn't buy it to flip it and sell it for a quick burn. They bought it to hold it and get a return. Now, if you look at property over the last 30 years or 40 years, properties went up and down and up and down and up and down, and that's very significant with the interest rate. But if your great-grandparents bought a flat in London for £6,000 and it was rented out for £100 a week and it was paid off within a matter of 10 years, it doesn't matter what its worth is to sell it, because it's always going to be returning you £1,000 a week rent now. So then it's now an asset rather than a liability. Now, when we look at food, is the food that we're eating an asset, or is the food that we're eating a liability? Are we eating more calories than what we're burning? So it's going to be a liability, right? An asset is food. Water is an asset. We need water to be hydrated. But it's also proven to us that if we're overhydrated, that can be sick as well. Yes. How are you spending your energy? Are you spending your energy effectively? Are you spending your energy in the best possible way that you probably could? How are you spending your time? It's like, for an example, if I was earning £1,000 an hour, right? Let's just say I was earning £1,000 an hour, and I had to go and get a haircut. So if I was earning £1,000 an hour, and I needed to work between 5 o'clock in the morning because that's when the market's opened, and I had to work to 7 o'clock at night, right? And I was earning £1,000 an hour, and I had to go and get a haircut, and that haircut was a 25-minute drive away from my house and a 25-minute drive back, right? Okay, I can capitalise on that time because I can still make some calls that needed to be made that's going to be building the blocks for me to make my £1,000 an hour or £10,000 an hour or £100,000 an hour or whatever it is that you've got, right? So that haircut that you've got to go for, and now you've got to sit in a queue, and there's 5 people in front of you in the queue, right? And a haircut is £20. So if you were to turn round and say to you, how about you let me go next and I'll pay for all your 5 haircuts, right? I'll pay for every single person's haircut if you let me go next. So it's cost you £100 to buy everybody's haircut, but you get to have your haircut and then you get to drive home. Now that haircut hasn't just cost you £20 or £120. That haircut has cost you an hour. So if you make £1,000 an hour, and that's £1,000 that you're away from your desk, and it's an hour of your time that you're not able to be available to service your clients in order for you to make your money, then that haircut's just cost you £1,120 and you still got to the front of the queue. So how do you start spending your energy more effectively for you? Now, yes, going for a haircut can be a nice experience. It can be seen as relaxing. It's something that most people do on a Saturday. That's why the barbers, for me, is always busier on a Saturday than it is on a Monday or Tuesday afternoon. Now, as we start to rewire our foundation, it's really helpful for us to start to see how we are reacting or responding to things that's in our current environment. Because when we're reacting to something in this current time continuum that we are experiencing right now as threatening, or we react like we have a tantrum, or we act in a hostile way, or it makes us aggressive. That particular guy that was walking past there, he was walking towards me, he's like, is that you doing your fucking vlog thing? I said, language, but we'll turn it fucking off. He reacted, right? Because he's not used to somebody telling him what to do. But I'm in my space, and in my space, I choose to protect that, and I can ask somebody, whether I'm doing a vlog or not, do you mind your language? Mind your language. Now, when you ask somebody, anybody, no matter what age they were, that guy's older than me, he's about 52 or 53, right? He wasn't reacting to me saying language. He was reacting to being told what to do. That was very significant, that interaction of this guy who's, he will run £1 million company. He's got 20 or 30 HGV lorries on the road. He's got a big contract, blah, blah, blah. He's severely overweight. He looks very unhealthy. And he doesn't look that happy. Now, he has taken stock of that, and he was walking towards me and he said, that's me going to get healthy. And I went, starts with the first step. Well, you listened, you were walking there. And when we piece down every interaction that we're having with people, we're not actually having interactions with people in this time continuum. We think we are. We're not. Your wounded child is having a conversation until you rewire your foundation. Your inner child, your wounded child, your needy child, your bullied child, your threatened child, your unvalidated child, your unloved child is having a conversation with someone else's wounded child. Do you mind your language? Turn it fucking off then. No. People go defensive. If somebody goes defensive like that, it's because they're waiting to get into trouble from mummy and daddy. They've just projected mum or dad onto you. They've just projected the person at the children's home that you lived in onto you. They've just projected somebody onto you, right? So as we start to rewire our foundation and we start to take responsibility for our own nervous system, okay, and we start to take responsibility for our own reactions to the world, how do we best do that? Okay, for me, this walk is vitally important to keep me sane, sober and sane, right? I've not done it for a month exactly. That's really, really taken its toll on me. Why have I took myself to that place? I need to figure that out, right? Saunas, they are really important to me. Now, I ask everybody that comes into the sauna, would you prefer saunas or steam rooms? And I would say that 75% of people answer with a steam room. And I'm like, that's interesting. I don't like the steam room. I can't stay in the steam room for any longer than 5 minutes, but I can sit in the sauna for half an hour. Saunas really work for me. Cold water, getting in the river, that works for me. So I'll build that in. I'm not going to jump straight at it this week. Tomorrow, I've got my PT. By next week, when I start my patterns again, I will be walking around here with a rucksack, with my towel and my flip-flops, and I'll be going into the river. So I'll start to stack all the stuff that really works for me, yeah, without going, I'm going to do my walk, I'm going to go in the water, I'm going to go for saunas, I'm going to eat healthy, I'm going to do this, blah, blah, blah. That's not going to work. That's not going to last very long, okay? So starting to stack it, let's just implement the change first, the walk first. I set my alarm yesterday for 5:54 to get out and do this walk. Didn't set an alarm this morning. Got up, walked down the stairs, checked my phone. What time was it? 5:54. Right? You just need to start programming into your subconscious mind new sets of habits, new sets of patterns, and you'll start to go towards them, even if those are negative, like the ones I shared yesterday around about the weight that I have now became. Anyway, I could be gibbering on here forever. I don't even know how long I've been chittering away for. Let me check. Hope it's been helpful. Wow, there's loads of people still on. We've been chatting for how long? Don't know. 34 minutes or something. Feels longer. Feels longer than that. Has this been helpful? Is there any questions, Patreon group, that need to be answered? I hope not, because there's a big woolly Alsatian coming towards me and I've not got leads for my dogs. So I better go and get them under control. Have a fantastic Tuesday, everybody. I hope that that has helped. I hope that that has been helpful. And any questions, pop it into the Patreon group. Thank you very much. Have a good day. Morning. How you doing?
How are you?
I'm well. Oh, you blooming boys will be boys. So now what I need to do is how do I stop the live? I don't know how to do that. Close. Yes.